Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this is the second video in our Principles of Management series. And in this video, I just want to give a quick overview of some of the people and throughout time who helped establish current modern day theories and systems related to management, give you a little bit of history, and talk about some key terms that will help build a foundation for the rest of this course. So here's what we're going to do in this video. I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. We're going to describe the origins of management practice and its early concepts and influences. We're going to summarize 5 classical approaches to management. We're going to discuss briefly 4 contemporary approaches to management, and we're going to identify modern contributors who have shaped management thought processes and practices. While as a formal area of study, the field of management is relatively new. Evidence of formalized management practices have been found dating back all the way to 5000 BC. The Industrial Revolution promoted a more structured approach to what we do today. And around 4000 BC, the Egyptians used planning, organizing, leading, and controlling to build the Great Pyramids, for instance. And as early as 1000 BC, the Chinese applied the managerial concepts of delegation, cooperation, efficiency, organization, and control. And in 500 BC, Sun Tzu discussed the importance of planning and leading in his book, The Art of War. All right, around 4000 to 350 BC, the Greeks reorganized management as a separate art and advocated for a scientific approach to work. And around 1436 AD, the Venetians standardized production through the use of an assembly line. In 1776, Adam Smith discussed control and the principle of specialization with regard to manufacturing workers. So, the evolution of thought has really progressed throughout the years. In the early 1800s, there was systematic management. In the 1900s, there was something called scientific management. In 1910, we talked about bureaucracy. In the early 1900s, also administrative management came around. In the 1930s, human relations came around. In the 1940s, socio-technical systems came about, and with that, quantitative management. And in the late 1950s, we started studying organizational behaviors and systems theory in the 1960s. And to this very date, through the 1980s to today, we talk about current and future revolutions. So let's get right into it and talk about systematic management. What is it? Well, it is a classical management approach that attempted to build into operations the specific procedures and processes that would ensure coordination of effort to achieve established goals and plans. On the other hand, scientific management is a classical management approach that applied to scientific methods to analyze and determine the one best way to complete production tasks, and that was introduced by Mr. Frederick Taylor. So let's talk about Taylor's 4 principles of scientific management. Number 1, management should develop a precise scientific approach for each element of one's work. Number 2, management should scientifically select, train, teach, and develop each worker. Number 3, management should cooperate with their workers. And number 4, management would ensure an appropriate division of work and responsibility. And if you think about the time that Mr. Taylor's work came out, people were essentially, I hate to use the term, owned by their company. And so Taylor essentially helped create a frame of mind where managers really could be able to understand how to get more out of people. With scientific management, Mr. Henry Gantt worked to become a protege of Mr. Frederick Taylor, and he expanded on the piece rate system by suggesting that frontline supervisors should receive a bonus for each of their workers who completed their assigned daily tasks. And Gantt is also known for creating the Gantt Chart, you've probably heard of it, which helps keep employees and managers plan projects by task and time to complete those works. So, an example of what's on a Gantt chart is, for instance, if you're working on a project for school. You've got a series of different steps which has a task related to it and clear identification of who's going to work on these different tasks and when they are to be accomplished. So you've got to be able to plan things out step by step, know who's going to do it, and when they need to be done by, and figure out where in the bigger scheme of things that task needs to be planned in. Other management pioneers include Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, and they used motion studies to identify and remove wasteful movements so workers could be more efficiently. So can you imagine being working at your workplace and having people study, how you're moving and how many steps you're taking and what movements you're making with your hand? All of these things kind of come down to science. So obviously the less motions you take, the quicker things are going to be done. So we talk a lot about efficiency when we think about Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. So Max Weber is a more contemporary writer, and he talked a little bit more about bureaucracy, and this philosophy is a classical management approach that emphasizes a structured formal network of relationships among specialized positions in the organization. So let's talk now about characteristics of an effective bureaucracy. First of all, you have to have a division of labor. That means dividing people according to tasks, assignments, and authority. They're very clear and specified. So I mentioned the word authority. Authority really is about a chain of command or hierarchy that's well established. I need to know who my boss is, I need to know who my boss's boss is, and I need to know who the other people in my organization are that I have access to in order to gain the resources or knowledge that they may represent. Qualifications is another characteristic of effective bureaucracy. People are selected and promoted based on merit. We need to know what skills, knowledge, and education and abilities each person has. So those are all about qualifications. You hire the right person, and then you help develop them in the organization. Ownership is that managers, not owners, run the organization. And then, in this case, rules. Impersonal rules should be applied consistently and fairly, so people need to understand what's expected of them. Policies and procedures really need to be written, spelled out, and people need to be trained within those rules so that they can do what they do best. And hopefully the policies make sense to help keep everybody working well with each other. So let's talk about another administrative management pioneer, Mr. Henry Fayol. Fayol was advocated administrative management, a classical management approach that attempted to identify major principles and functions that managers could use to achieve superior organizational performance. He identified 5 functions and 14 principles of management. The 5 functions are planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Write those down. Again, that's planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. And if you think about what managers do, we still use those essentials today. Here are the 14 principles of management. Division of work. Divide work into specialized tasks and assign responsibilities to specific individuals. Authority, delegate authority along with responsibility. 3, discipline, make expectations clear and punish violations. Number 4, unity of command. Each employee should be assigned to only one supervisor. You ever had more than one boss? It's a headache, right? Number 5, unity of direction. Employees' efforts should be focused on achieving organizational objectives. Number 6, subordination of individual interests to the general interest. The general interest must be predominant. remuneration. And this is a systematically rewarding efforts that support the organization's direction. We don't use that word very much, kind of hard to say, and that's probably why we don't use it anymore. And centralization is to determine the relative importance of superior and subordinate roles. Number 9, scalar chain, and that's to keep communication within the chain of command. Number 10, order jobs and materials so that they support the organization's direction. Equity, fair discipline, and order enhance employee commitment. Number 12, stability and tenure of personnel promote employee loyalty and longevity. Number 13, initiative, encourage employees to act on their own in support of organization's direction. And esprit de corps, which is to promote a unity of interest between employees and management. A lot of things to know there today, and even though these principles came out many, many years ago, essentially good leaders still apply these concepts in their management practices. So Chester Bernard published a book in 1938 called The Functions of the Executive. And what it did was outline the role of the senior executive, and it formulated the purpose of the organization, hiring key individuals, and maintaining organizational communications. And if you've ever had a job, or you still have a job, you'll still see that these essentials are key to running a successful organization today, right? Got to have the right people in the right places with the right skills, and they need to know what they need to do, right? And so that's about communication. Mary Parker Follett emphasized the continual changing of situations that managers face, and she suggested that there are two key contributions: the notion that managers desire flexibility, and secondly, there's a difference between motivating groups and motivating individuals. And now let's talk about human relations, one of my favorite topics. This is a classic management approach that attempted to understand and explain how human psychological and social processes interact with the formal aspects of the work situation to influence performance. One of my favorite theories is called the Hawthorne effect. And essentially, in this research, they studied people to find out what affected the way that they worked, and essentially observing people helps people produce more. So which, if you think about at the time, as I believe this is the 1920s or 1930s, people in a manufacturing plant were being observed, and they lowered the temperature and raised the temperature and brightened the lights. And the only thing that really seemed to affect people's productivity really was being observed. And so it's really important to know how important it is to observe people. One of the famous motivational theorists was Abraham Maslow. And he suggested that there are 5 levels of motivation, and I'll talk about that in another video. I think I've talked about it in another video anyway. But essentially, a satisfied need no longer satisfies, but you gotta have these 5 essential things met all the time. So you have to think about physiological safety, social, ego, and then ultimately at the top, self-actualization, and they build on each other. And if you pull any of these pieces of this pyramid away, the pyramid will collapse. So you got to build on each other and constantly feed people's need for motivation if you want to keep people motivated. A socio-technological systems theory is an approach to job design that attempts to redesign tasks to optimize operation of a new technology while preserving employees' interpersonal relationships and human aspects of work. So that's socio-technical systems theory. And quantitative management is an approach that emphasizes the application of quantitative analysis to managerial decisions and problems. And then finally, organizational behavior is an approach that studies and identifies management activities that promote employee effectiveness by examining the complex and dynamic nature of individuals, groups, and organizational processes. So, if you think about it, all of this really relates to systems theory. And systems theory is really all about recognizing how things affect each other, and we each affect each other. And so essentially systems theory is a theory stating that an organization is a managed system that has changes with inputs and outputs. So included in this at the very beginning are raw materials, human resources, energy, financial resources, information, equipment. Then within the organization, there's a transformation process that takes place, and then the output are the goods and the services. And everybody has an effect in the organization on those outputs. So with the contingency perspective, this proposes that the managerial strategies, structures, and processes that result in high performance depend on the characteristics or important contingencies or the situation in which they are applied. So every manager should have a good repertoire of, if this happens, then we've got to do this. And it really is important that if you want to have high motivated employees, you have to have systems in place that help keep people motivated and moving forward. Porter identified competitive strategy, and he published over 125 articles and 18 books on the subject related to competitive strategy. Hamill, another Harvard guy, talked about management innovation and was ranked as the world's most influential business thinker. Peter Drucker, discussed management by exemption, decentralization, human as assets, and knowledge workers. One of the smartest people that have ever lived, as far as I'm concerned. But the bottom line with Drucker is he said that organizations need to set clear objectives. What gets measured gets improved. Peter Senge's famous work was The Fifth Dimension, and he really brought up how the organization needs to be a learning organization. And in this, every individual needs to constantly know what they don't know and constantly be supported by people above them to continue the learning process. Dr. Stephen Covey wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and in that he really boiled down some essentials for being an effective leader, including putting first things first and beginning with the end in mind. We'll seek first to understand, then to be understood. So lots of wisdom in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Collins wrote about level 5 leaders in his book Good to Great. So a lot of great out there that have really helped leaders become the best they can be. And leaders really must be managers, or managers must be leaders. And we'll talk about that in a later video. So let's give this video was really meant to be less than 20 minutes, and so we talked about the origins of management. We went back to the Egyptians, the Chinese, Sun Tzu, ancient Greeks, Phoenicians. We talked about 5 classical approaches to management: systematic management, scientific management, bureaucracy, administrative management, and human relations. We talked about 4 contemporary approaches to management: the socio-technical systems, quantitative management, organizational behavior, systems theory, and then modern contributors that we just got done discussing were Porter, Hamill, Drucker, Senge, and Covey. All right. That's what I have for you. I hope that this helps lay down a foundation for you. Again, if I went over things too fast, go back and watch the video again. Tell your friends. What the heck. All right. Thank you so much for your valuable time in watching this video. I hope this has been helpful. Stay tuned, and I hope you watch the whole series of videos and can take things away to help you create a career that you truly love. And even more importantly than that, I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr.